When you taste a Stag's Leap District Cabernet, you understand what all the fuss is about. Welcome to this legendary neighborhood for extraordinary wine. This minute appellation, nestled between the majestic Palisades to the east and low-lying hills to the west, cradles the world's finest Cabernet. Ancient volcanic eruptions gave rise to gravelly soils. Here, low-vigor vines produce small berries that yield wine of great power, grace, and intensity. This unique valley within a valley, also gifted with long, cool nights and warm summer days, provides the perfect arena for this noble grape to thrive. Over a century ago, farming families began an unknown journey on this sacred land with visionary dreams. Today, with the collective dedication to sustainable practices in artisanal winemaking, they bring this land to its full potential. Come discover Stag's Leap District's rich history, unparalleled beauty, and immerse yourself in a transcendent glass of Cabernet Sauvignon.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Russ Weis, president at Silverado and the lucky host of our very, very first virtual panel celebrating the 2018 Stag's Leap District Appellation Collection. And what a way to start off. I am here surrounded by some wonderful friends, some wonderful neighbors, and they're very, very delicious wines, which I am smelling now. And that's why my introduction is going to be short, because I want to get into tasting them. But we're here to discuss the wines, obviously, the collection, but more importantly, with this August panel, we're here to talk a little bit about the birth of this fantastic appellation through the prism of these wonderful wines. So without further ado, we're gonna go in chronological order in terms of the folks who settled into this fabulous and unique part of the Napa Valley first, and second, and third, and so on. So Ernie, I wanna hand it over to you. Give a little introduction and talk about the wines and talk about your role in this fantastic appellation.
Great, fantastic. Thanks, Russ. Ernie Ilsley with Ilsley Vineyards. I was going to just jump into the wines right now. We've got the 18s on the table. I'm going to slide in here and get to our wine here and kind of
first with everybody that's out there in the great webosphere, I hope you guys got a glass of something in your hands. Salute. Yeah, cheers. You're great good health. It's good to be with you.
Fantastic vintage, right? 2018 was fantastic. Kind of a warm growing season that rolled into a cooler October, which allowed us to kind of let our fruit hang out there for, we picked this block later part of October into November, which really, for me, just gives this wine, really nice dark flavors and really lushness on the aroma. I've been really happy with the way these wines turned out. The tannins for me for an 18, it's still obviously they're pretty youthful wines, but it's really got a lingering juiciness to it. It just makes me want to go back for some more. So the fruit that we use for our wine is from our family vineyard, which my grandparents purchased in about 1955, 1956. So we've been here a while. Of course, back then they weren't planted to Cabernet and Merlot. We were growing some of the varieties that were hanging around from Prohibition days. Alicante Boucher, Carragon, Petit Syrah. Right?
Yeah.
So it was a different time in the valley back then. There wasn't a lot of money in growing grapes in the 1950s. So we worked our day jobs. Well, I wasn't alive then, but my parents and my grandparents worked their day jobs, and they farmed after work and on the weekends, and it was a bit of a grind.
Yeah.
But for us, it kind of changed in the mid '60s when Robert Mondavi, convinced my grandfather to plant Cabernet, pull out some of those old Prohibition varieties and plant Cabernet.
Right.
Which he listened to, and he did, and it was a good move. Helped us in really two ways. First, we started making a little bit of money, which wasn't bad. They were paying a premium for Cabernet finally, right? So it was great. But also probably the bigger thing, which we didn't realize back then, is we really started working kind of collaboratively with the winemaking teams and the viticulturists at that point. And they kind of taught us how to make wine and grow fantastic grapes. So we did that for decades, for generations, until 2000 when we felt like we had learned enough and wanted to take that knowledge, all that generational knowledge, and make our own wine. So we came up with our Ilsley Vineyards 2000 Cabernet and released it with the concept of taking the very best 10 tons of fruit from our property and making very special, small amounts of great wine, and then continued working with other growers. In fact, most of the fruit that we don't use for our wine, we sell to the Shafer winery.
Yeah,
So,
I have to interrupt. I'm seriously. I mean, you know, we've been doing business with Ernie and his family for many, many years. They're great grape growers, and we love their grapes. We love making wine from them. But one, you know, and you know, I pay them a lot of money, but which is fine. I pay everybody a lot of money for grapes because it's worth it. You know, I'm not complaining about that. But Ernie, I'm tasting this wine, and it's really, really good. And it's like, how come I can't get the 10 best tons?
I think it's always your concept. It's like, why are you going to do the dregs, right?
Yeah, no, yeah. No,
I feel like this is,
I'm teasing.
we're not the birth of the appellation, we're the birth of the new contract.
Yeah, it's probably time to renegotiate.
We're talking 2022.
I get it, but you know, you remind me, it's like you say these things that are just so casual, and I don't think people kind of recognize. You say, yeah, so then Bob and Davi and whatever, and then Cabernet, and then we just started growing Cabernet and we were making money. I mean, I don't think people realize how inobvious that was. I mean, you think about, like, I want to say you guys were one of the foundational modern era Cabernet guys. I mean, you know, there was Fay, in 61, 62, something like that, and then I think Dick Stelzner might have been next.
Late 60s,
and then it was you guys, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And I want to say the whole valley was like Chenin Blanc or something back then. I mean, there was no Cabernet around. That wasn't like the obvious thing to do.
Growers got paid by the ton, so the heavier the grape, the bigger crop, the more money you got.
So that was really pioneering stuff, Ernie.
That's an interesting point too that you make, Russ. It seems so obvious now, right? Back then, it was not that obvious, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we were across the street, you know, was Harry C., obviously. He had Chardonnay. That's what he was doing.
Yeah, we had Chardonnay.
You're in Stags Leap District, right? Yeah. So that was really cool. I mean, that was it was your granddad, right? Yeah. I mean, he was, you know, he was out there on a limb, actually.
Yeah, he was, but I think a lot of people, as Robert Mondavi recommended things, people listened to him, right?
Yeah.
So he had a good advisor.
That's super cool.
But what's fascinating is that you know they had their day jobs and they grew grapes on the weekends and at night.
Yeah, that's a real testament.
That shows you that you know there wasn't a lot of money in farming grapes.
And that was well before there was an appellation, or anybody even thought about an appellation. That's you know, like 20 years earlier, right? Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, more than that.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of which, so somewhere around there, your family was looking for a spot to do something.
Absolutely. So Olav Goelet here from Clos Winery, representing, I guess now the third generation. My grandfather came out here probably just after you guys had planted vineyards. So he was out here in the late 60s, 1969, with young French winemaker Bernard Portet. They ended up settling on a property just not far from where you are here and what we're all in Stag's Leap today. And I think their pursuit was to find a location where they could make great Cabernet Sauvignon-based wines. Both a history in winemaking in Bordeaux. Bernard absolutely from the winemaking side. My grandfather was more on his family were in the wine merchant and negociant side. But they both had a similar passion for adventure, and I think, gosh, I wish I honestly at that age could have been on the journey that they did, because not only spending time here, but spending a lot of time in Australia and South America and South Africa, but ultimately it was this location. I think for Bernard, who from his training as a viticulturalist, it was all about the terroir. That was what was indoctrinated in him from his father, and it just seemed to him right of all the places that they came to, and even within Napa Valley, this little pocket here. He just found there was something about the soil, but really also the temperature. You know, he always says to me, I knew I couldn't control the heat, but I knew I was going to get cool nights here. And as he's spending days up and down the valley in the evenings, it was certainly cooler in this pocket. So, you know, I listen to these stories, and it inspires me to think about how much this valley has changed in a 50-year period, 60 years. And I think that's probably one of the things that really drew certain people to this valley was there was that sort of that agrarian community, people who just, they wanted to try new things, and passion wasn't going to get pushed aside just because there wasn't a monetary outcome at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's what brings great people here. So it's an honor to be sitting here at the table with the three of you and tasting this wine from our vineyard here in Stag's Leap.
Well, I think it's great. I think it's great that you're back in town. I mean, the whole, you know, it's a family business, and you know, the whole third generation come back. So it's been great having you here.
Yeah.
Really
Oh,
cool.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's exciting times.
Tell me about the vineyard, why is it got this fabulous Hirondelle name?
So the vineyard, it's been a long relationship, both long-term lease arrangement and then obviously some own property as well with one of our neighbors who were really instrumental in helping my grandfather Bernard get off the ground, the Ragucci family. But so the Hirondelle property, they erected the winery in 1973. So the first vintage was made in that cellar in 74.
Okay.
And that summer we had cliff swallows that would come to the winery. And cliff swallows in French is hirondelle. And they are an
that's
absolute nuisance.
They are.
They're a mess. But we've learned to have to embrace them. And in Bordeaux, and at least in that part of France, the culture, it is a sign of good fortune. So Bernard said, don't even think about touching them. They're here, and it's a good sign. So we adopted it. We've named our vineyard after it, and they do a good job with insects and all that. But the summertime, they can be quite messy.
They can.
So that's the Hirondelle name, and we've decided to make this wine, which is a slightly different from, I would say, Bernard's philosophy of blending wines. It's 100% Cabernet, but I think we felt specifically with our location here in Stag's Leap and what immense, I think, power but beauty that the Cabernet grape can bring from that area. We wanted to pay a tribute with its own wine, single varietal. So small allocation, but a wine that we've become very fond of.
Fantastic. Just delicious. And I remember, of course, being out there, the good old days when the golf course was still out there, and went right around your winery. And man, you got there in the evening, those swallows are just
Golf balls everywhere as well.
golf balls everywhere.
I found
Yeah, half of those are mine.
I'll be looking for one with your signature on it. But when I first came out here in 2018, I was looking through some of the old archives. In the first or second board meeting, they used to have them in these little leather-bound books, and there was a whole section discussing a complaint that had been filed to the county because the golfers were turning at one of the tee boxes and trying to hit the wine.
No, but I wasn't trying. I just want to. I have no idea where it's going.
Oh man, that was Chimney Rock Golf Course.
Golf course, yeah.
That's where Dad and I used to have our matches, man. 18 holes.
Nice.
And years later, we bought a vineyard right next to where the golf course. Well, it had been, but it was a vineyard, and we were developing it. It's like, and this was, God, 1990. We kept finding golf balls. That many years later, it was just like.
I mean, can you imagine? I mean, you think about that now. It's like, whoa.
It was
not the highest and best use.
But it was a great track. It was a good, you remember it, it was a good track.
Well, that brings us to you. Who are you?
I'm Doug Shafer. I'm a former professional golfer. Not true. But we Shafer Vineyards, we have a little winery across the street and make some wine. We have a lot of fun doing it. Been doing it a long time. I buy grapes from this guy. We buy grapes from Clos. Can you sell me some grapes too?
Possibly not now.
Okay, we'll talk later. But there's lots of, as you folks can see, there's lots of intersecting stories here, and we all know them, but we're sharing them with you today. But my dad moved us out from Chicago in 1973. He came out, he wanted to get in the wine business. He was not a wine drinker, but he heard it was going to be a good thing, so he was kind of betting on the future. He ended up in the Central Coast. This is what he told me, Central Coast looking for vineyards. And he was talking to some local guy down there, and the guy said, "What do you want?" He goes, "I want to grow wine grapes." He goes, "Well, what are you doing down here in Paso Robles?" And Dad said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, you should go up to Napa." And Dad said, "Where's Napa?"
Where's Napa?
So in the early 70s, we were in Chicago, across the country. Now, we weren't wine drinkers, or he wasn't. Napa itself was unknown. Kind of as compared to today. So it's pretty interesting. So he came up to Napa, looked around, Spotswood was for sale, a few other really great properties, and he had something about hillside vineyards. He'd read some book about quality from hillsides. I think it was something about, it was an Italian book, and I think they basically said, plant your crops on the deep soil so they'll grow, plant the grapevines in the hills because they'll grow anywhere. Right. So, but the translation got mixed up. But this place across the street he found and he bought it. And then as he was out here, one of his favorite stories he used to tell was, because he and Bernard Portet became very good friends and in fact helped establish the Stags Leap District. But he used to tell the story. It's like, Bernard Portet and your grandfather went around the world looking for the best place to grow Cabernet, and they ended up here, just a mile away from me. So
just a mile away.
And his research was, because people talk about our place in the terroir, and he goes, dumb luck, got lucky, and he meant it, got lucky. So that was a fun one. But moved out in 73. Grapes were here in the valley, but there were lots of prunes and cattle and almonds, and not a profitable business by a stretch. And he started planting grapes, started making wine. And during that time, so I was finishing high school. One vivid memory for myself was where I'd come home in the afternoon or whatever, sometimes or on the weekend, driving up to our house where the winery is. There'd be old man Ilsley on his old Caterpillar tractor in the vineyard next door. Your grandfather, your namesake, Ernie. He was old man, he was the old guy, And on his lap was this little tiny tow-haired boy, little blonde-haired kid. It wasn't you. It could have been you. It was either you or David, your brother, on this tractor. He's probably 4 or 5 years old, on his granddad's lap, or you, driving this tractor. And David is now my director of vineyards for the last 15, 20 years. So, again, a lot of ties. But anyway, his first Cabernet was a 78 cab. First hillside cab, basically the grandfather to Hillside Select. And he didn't know anything about the business. We made 1,000 cases, and there was some big tasting down at Silverado Country Club. I don't know if it was a Wine Institute thing or something. The vintners, was something. So he was pouring his wine. And it was 1981, 82. And every year there's, kind of a hot new winery. So there was some buzz about the Shafer cab going around. But he was pouring it, and brand new, this whole thing. And this guy, he was a buyer at Scott's Seafood. Remember Scott's Seafood in the city? I forget the guy's name. But he came back 2 or 3 times, and he leaned over to Dad and said, how much Merlot is in this? Dad says, nothing, it's 100% cab. The guy says, no, there's no way, because the wine was very soft. So this guy kept coming back and asking the question, because he was drinking a little bit, to the point where he actually went around the table, and he whispered in Dad's ear and says, look, I promise I won't tell anybody, but tell me how much Merlot's in here. And Dad's like, there's nothing. And Dad had no idea what this guy was talking about. But I think it's planted the seed that the Cabernets from the Stags Leap District have that soft texture. So that was kind of the start. And then that was 81, 82, and then in the mid to late 80s, that's when he and Bernard and Dick Stelzner got together, probably a couple other folks, and started hatching this idea of, hey, we should recognize this area, the Stags Leap District, the sub-appellation, because it has terroir, and the Cabernets that come out of this part of the valley are very unique and are very similar. These wines are all brothers and cousins and sisters right here. They're all related.
What I love about that group is it wasn't just winemakers. I mean, it was, it was growers as well.
Right,
You guys were
my
very
grandfather
instrumental in
participated in
that.
that as well. Yeah.
I mean, obviously your dad, I think your dad chaired the group.
Right, and then Bernard was second chair or something. I mean, it was an amazing
Group.
Well, and Gary Andrus and Pine Ridge, it was
Right.
kind of funny. One time I remember there was a meeting, because, with neighbors get along, but sometimes they don't.
They ruffle feathers.
And then Elias and I were out racking barrels, and there was this glass door into this conference room at Shafer, and there was 8 or 10 of these folks in there, and a couple of them were not on speaking terms, but they're all coming together to talk about the formation of the sub-appellation Stags Leap. But it was kind of funny, because I remember going to Alaska. Look who's in there. They're all being civil to each other. It's pretty cool.
Well, we were left out at one point. They're going to draw a line
That's
right there
right.
at your property.
That's right.
So
Try to cut you out.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Hey, Ernie. We were right behind you.
You guys were on the wrong side of the.
Well, it's
of
funny
the
because
trail.
there was originally peak to peak, right?
I don't remember.
and not on the west side
Yeah.
of
Kind of
the knob that we're sitting on here.
Right.
I mean, some people will call that the Pine Ridge knob. I like to call it the Silverado knob, but whatever.
I'll go with that.
But it's right here. I mean, it would have cut
right through our
Would've cut right
fireplace
through your
here.
fireplace.
So we would have had a little piece in, and then the one directly north wouldn't be in. And that's when you came in,
No,
we got in.
and so we finally got everybody in.
Yeah.
But then what's funny, I remember when it was kind of on the final stages of getting approved, a couple folks further south says, well,
wait a minute.
yeah. So it's kind of like you got to quote draw the line somewhere.
Right.
So
But I think at the end of the day, it really ended up being a couple of things which were really interesting. It ended up being really one of the great delineated, demarcated appellations. It really, if you think about all the soil types, which are really informed by the landslide off the Palisades, and then you think about this wind tunnel effect between, where you guys are and where we are, speeding up the wind through this area, that gives you that drying and cooling effect that we've talked about, and then that gives you kind of this texture.
Right.
That's just so amazing and really kind of only here, which is super cool in the valley.
it's nice. See, I think I think the weather really dictates it. Not so much because soils. You got all these different
Well,
soils. The wines are all still soft.
You know what?
So it's like-
You and I have talked forever about
yeah.
dirt versus whatever. But I think here's where we can agree is that topography creates weather, right? If we didn't have this little carburetor, right? I mean,
Right.
that's what it is, speeding up the air through here.
Right.
We wouldn't get that weather that you're talking about, and that's really pretty cool. That's really pretty cool.
And it's a small. It's compared to a lot of sub-appellations, it's really relatively pretty small.
That's right.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Because it's.
What
about you?
Well, wait a minute. We haven't even talked about your wine yet.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. It's 18. These 4 wines are really pretty. Except for the Ilsley is really, really good.
It's fantastic.
And this is our 1.5 2018. It's a Stags Leap District designated wine, mostly Cab, a little Petit Verdot, a little Merlot sometimes. The name speaks to the family generation, my dad and myself. He started it as a second career. I joined him relatively early, so we did it together. So instead of being your traditional first and second generation, it was 1.5.
Yeah.
So hence 1.5.
That's cool.
That's fantastic.
That's cool. Yeah.
But it's fine. But let's talk about Silverado.
Yeah, so it's our contribution to the table is the Solo, which I think you all know is its named because it's only one thing. It's the C clone, right? So Harry C's.
That's right.
So it's 100% sea
Yeah, so this is 100% sea clone. And that's a cool story. Well, I mean, first of all, I'm fortunate enough to work for the Miller family,
Right.
who came in the Valley 1976. And everybody's like, well, how did the Millers get to the Valley? Well, it's pretty more typical, I think, than your stories, in the sense that, you know, Diane and her mom were driving, they just got past what's now, you know, Don Giovanni.
Right.
And the valley opens up,
Yeah.
right? And the minute Diane finds a phone, she calls Ron down in Burbank and says, I have to live here. And that was that. And they knew Harry C. And Diane just kept pestering Harry because she wanted the Silverado vineyard.
But what did Harry do? He did something.
Harry was the grandson of Mary C., who's the candy maker, C's Candy, right?
The candy maker.
And he bought this vineyard from it wasn't a vineyard. I mean, it was originally a vineyard in like 1884 or something, right? I mean, it goes back that far. But during Prohibition, you know, everything kind of fell apart, and the Geckens were running cattle,
Okay.
you know, back here because of the river, basically, plenty of water and whatever. And so he bought it from the Geckens, and he was the guy that restored the vineyard. Okay. And somewhere in there, you know, same kind of story. Bob and Davies, you know, wander around telling people to plant Cabernet, and he had a guy running the place that Dick Stelzner always calls the professional, right? Because John Brock was his name, and he was actually a horticulturist.
Okay.
So there wasn't any such thing as a viticulturist in the 40s,
Yeah.
but he was a trained horticulturist. Developed orchards and vineyards
Right.
for people, and C finally hired him in this place. And they had Chardonnay, and they were selling it to Montelena. But Brock called C and said, look, everybody's planting Cabernet here. We better jump on this bandwagon. Well, I think it was about a year after you guys planted. And he went off to Concannon and brought Clone 8 here because, you know, vigorous and, you know, supposed to be delicious and whatever. The only thing he didn't think about was drought and water. So he sticks it on these slopes, and it just, you know, Clone 8 is not a particularly water, you know, it needs some water. And so it kind of went kapoof on him, and Brock, you know, he was a horticulturist. So he started a nursery down A block down here, and just every year he just picked out the best cuttings from that Clone 8.
Interesting.
25 years later, he had something that, Bacchus has planted a sea clone. It's kind of all up and down this part of the valley. It's pretty good.
The sea clone is
pretty good clone. Everybody.
great clone, yeah.
It's kind of Stag's Leap's gift to the,
Yeah,
you know,
it's fantastic.
to the wine.
Yeah, it's a great clone.
grape catalog. You know, the grapevine catalog, right? FPS 30, right? So that's what Solo is. It's sort of that expression of kind of Silverado's, well, not still, there's Stag's Leap's unique clone that kind of got created on this property.
That's great.
We were talking about what a nice neighborhood it is. So Ernie knows this, but his sister was my daughter's first preschool teacher.
I didn't know that.
And maybe she thinks still the best teacher she ever had. And,
I could see that.
Yeah, but we have a story. I mean, neither you or I were here at the time, but Silverado, when we finally decided to, well, I should finish the story.
Yeah.
Diane was
Yeah.
bugging Harry because she
Right.
wanted this vineyard. He didn't want to sell it. So he's like, go talk to my niece. She's across the river. It's all the same stuff. Well, on the other side of the river, it's not the same stuff.
It's not the same stuff.
But Diane loved the house. So she and Ron bought that big rambling farmhouse right across the river. But if you wanted to drive Diane nuts, you couldn't have done a better job than to give her a big wraparound porch where she sat on the back porch and looked at this vineyard. And so she got a little bit obsessed with it, which was awesome. So 76, they bought that property where the Sauvignon Blanc is, the Miller Ranch.
Right,
Right across the river.
I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
and then 78, she finally talked Harry into this place, and then he just immediately had seller's remorse and bought at the other end of the knob, which is now Realm. So he developed that.
Oh, he
vineyard.
did?
I
Yeah.
did not know that.
Yeah, he developed that vineyard.
That's a great story.
So that's how we finally got here.
That's funny.
But when the Millers finally decided to make wine, it was 81. I think it was our December, right? Kind of went.
Your press.
The press went poof.
Press went bad.
Right. it kind of blew up on us or
You
something.
had crushed grapes. So back in those days with white grapes, you'd actually crush them, destem and crush them, and then you put it in the press. Sometimes that still goes on, but now it's whole cluster pressing. But once you crush the grapes, you got must. You've got, you kind of got to, especially white grapes, you kind of got to get to it. You got to get it pressed and get that juice inside and get it cooled off. And
At that
so,
point, you were no longer half born.
yeah. And so, so I was working at Lake Spring, but living at my folks' house as a cellar rat. And I remember kind of hearing some stories. And all of a sudden, I was home early one day, and I see these 2 or 3 gondolas being pulled up our driveway, in pickup trucks, and they were white grapes, and it's like it was sloshing around in the gondola. I was like,
Well, right. So we had a,
your press broke down.
the dreaded phrase that you never want to hear during crush from your neighbor. Hey, what you doing right now? Well, we had no place to press this stuff, right? So Jack Stewart, my predecessor,
Called my dad.
called your dad, and your dad said, yeah, bring it down.
So they had this must, which was probably in a tank, because that's what we used to do in those days. He'd crush it to a tank and then press it, as the press came free. So they had to get sluice this must. This must is juice, skins, and seeds, but it's sloppy and into these. How are we going to get over there? Right. No one had a tank or truck,
Right.
And plus you got skins, so you can't really pump it. So they somehow got into these gondolas, these big 4 or 5 ton gondolas.
Can you
and
imagine?
hauled it over here, and then somehow, I don't know how they got into our press, because we had an old funky press at that time,
Yeah.
Wilmus thing. And somehow they got in the press and they pressed it out. So
Yeah.
they got the juice and then took the juice. I bet you they probably found a couple of porter tanks. Could get
They
the
had
juice
to by
into
that
it.
point, right?
Or no, we probably juiced it in our place and probably just fermented it there. Big deal.
Yeah.
Finish off.
So our first little lot of Silverado was proudly custom crushed by,
Custom
by
crushed.
Shafer Custom Crushing.
No,
But it's
know
like,
that.
I think I love that story because that's just one of so many stories. You were talking about Jimmy Ragucci and his family, and one of so many stories where neighbors around here just help each other out.
You're up at the,
Right.
you need a tractor, something's done, you need a forklift, how many times do you see somebody driving a forklift up and down between these,
Yeah.
the strips?
Right.
It's like,
So I listen. Hey, I want to just do a couple of things before I know we're going to open some stuff up for questions. But Ernie, you started this by talking about 2018,
Right.
and let's just camp out a little bit on that. That was an extraordinary vintage. Just an amazing one. Big. It was so big.
Yeah.
But usually with that kind of vintage, if you have a big one, it's usually you're a little bit worried about how the numbers are coming in and what.
Once in a while you get both, and that was one of them.
But the weather was, like I said, it was warm early season, but then it cooled. And I can't remember ever picking in November, and we actually picked a couple blocks in November. So you had unbelievable ripening. We did have which didn't have really any impact on this, but we had a 1-inch rainstorm one night for about 2 hours. It just poured, but it just cleared right up, and it really had no impact on things. We actually had a crew ready to pick, and we were doing it for a client, and so it's like I just started calling the winemaker, cellar master, owner, back again.
No one's awake.
Finally got somebody up and said, you know what, we're gonna hold off on this. But it had really no impact, but we were able to just let things kind of ride, right, and just.
Yeah.
You're tasting these wines, I think.
Doesn't it? It sort of reminds me of. I don't know what normal is anymore, but it was such a great, long, cool, even thing, and even the harvest was even and no heat spikes, and so that let us bring it all in. If we were, you imagine if we got a heat spike like that?
No, we couldn't have gotten it in.
Yeah.
No, it's just, it's
Tank
spaced out really nice.
Right, tank space would have been an issue. You're right. So I just love that vintage. We don't do it very often. But Diane never wanted to make like a reserve wine. She thought you should make the best thing you know how to make, and why are you holding out on us, right? And so we do make every now and then a wine called Limited when we think the vintage is just totally extraordinary. And we actually did one in 18.
Is that
We just
right?
thought, Well, that is just incredible. So I just think,
Well, how come that's not? Oh, the limited.
well, I'm not saying it's better or anything. Also, part of it might have come from Coombsville, which we can't be talking about right now. I mean,
Understood. Fair enough.
But I just think for folks who are, out there thinking about the Appellation collection, I mean, this one's really one for the ages. I mean, the 18 is just ridiculous. So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad you started on that discussion. To say a little bit about it.
We've had some amazing vintages pretty much from 12, right, 2012, but this is, I think, one of the better vintages, so.
Really pretty. I just remember everything came in so heavy. 97 was the same way. 97 was big and good, but it was just like, but you're so, and 18 was the same way. You're so like overwhelmed with the volume that you can't appreciate how good the grapes are. Because it's like, normally on a normal year, it's okay, it's at 10 tons, it's supposed to be 10 tons. And 18 to the 10-ton block was 17 tons. And so it's like, you're running around worrying about tanks and where to put stuff. And you don't really appreciate what's coming in the door. But 97 was the same way. And you didn't really realize it until after you're done kind of picking and fermenting. It's like you start tasting them, and there's not grapes on the floor. And it's like, God, these are great. So
We were,
similar year.
we were out, I mean, there's another story with this 18. We were out back with our office orders. And John and I were like scratching our heads like,
What's wrong with this machine?
Oh, it's not spitting anything out.
it wasn't spinning.
No, we
We were like, oh, here we go. And finally John's like, look at this fruit.
The fruit's beautiful.
It's not kicking anything out. So you got something pretty good when the machine that sorts, color berry by berry is saying, all good.
It's all good.
All good, baby. Folks are asking us, since we're talking about it,
Folks are asking us about this vintage.
what do you think?
Why is everybody looking at me?
You seem like you're talking first, go for it.
You go for it. Olaf will go.
As the layman at the table. Because, so what I've seen, what I've spoken with our winemaker, our vineyard management team, obviously light vintage from a volume standpoint. Surprising that it was a bit, for us, it was a bit sporadic. It wasn't consistent even by vineyard. We had some blocks that were, 50% of what we had expected, some that were closer to 80%. But I think, in general, what we're seeing from the quality of the fruit is promising. I think we like what we're seeing. It's very concentrated juice, smaller berries, but good concentrated juice extraction from the grape. So I think we're optimistic. I think it looks like it could be a really good year for us. But it certainly was challenging, especially from a sort of planning standpoint, because the set looked like it was a decent sort of volume. Just sort of, if we hadn't had the set we did, it would have been a really challenging year. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited when I hear the winemaker, and we work with Bernard quite a bit now. We've got a young winemaker with us, and so to hear the two of them sort of
Doing that
sit
thing.
around the corner, but I sort of peek in and listen, and it sounds like it's going to be great. So, I don't know if that's consistent with what you guys have seen.
Oh yeah, for sure. But what I loved, I mean, it definitely was lighter crop, but what I liked about it was the way the berries set up. So it wasn't like a normal shatter lightness. It was just kind of the end of the drought and kind of the vines just being
Nice loose clusters.
nice loose, really
not-
small berries,
yeah.
but nice loose clusters. So we really have a lot of botrytis pressure. It was good from that point of view, and some really tannic wines. We got some.
They're firm.
They're big.
wines.
They're firm.
Crazy great year on quality.
I think so.
Yield was way down.
Yeah.
Aromas and flavors are great. They're remind me of 15 being a drought. 15 was a drought year, and so the tannins are pretty firm. They're going to take a while to open up, But all I can tell you is, man, every day I walked in that cellar, it just smelled like heaven. I mean, every tank smelled great. And you rarely get that. You rarely get everything. You know, there's always one or two that's like, what's going on? It just was like, whew. So the fruit was killer.
Yeah.
Killer good.
Yeah.
So good year. You know, we'll wait to see. I'm not going to, but so
I think after 2020, there's just, as long as you have some fruit, there's no such thing as a bad year anymore.
That's always been the case. Mr. Mondavi taught us
That's
that.
right. That's right. Best vintage
Best
ever.
vintage ever.
Best vintage ever. Yeah, so I'm excited. I really am.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
More questions? Russ is our question man, by the way.
Yeah,
So
well,
look to him. He's got the electronic device.
Via feed from our fabulous
Our feed.
district director, Nancy Violic. Nancy, I think, asked me about Solo because I didn't talk about it. Was that it? Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Well,
you did. Yeah, you
Solo
did.
here.
Yeah, talk again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I think just to talk a little bit more about the C clone, that I think because over that 20 generations of selecting those little variants that became a larger variant that finally UC Davis designated as a heritage clone. One of the things about that is it developed distinct from its parentage of which we think was clone 7 or 8. That C clone really develops a little bit more of stone fruit kind of focus. So I always feel like it's more, this wine is always more in the range of plum and cherry, and even sometimes sour plum. It gets that kind of a tart sort of feeling to it, and we like it kind of right on the edge where it's got a little bit of that salty plum sort of feeling to it, so that it's got really bright, really energetic fruit that maybe isn't so mouth filling as it is kind of more mouth coating. So it's a little bit more elegant, and it just stays with you on the finish for a while. So that's what we're kind of shooting for. Something that's fairly elegant with a lot of really good sort of deep stone fruit quality. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
Pretty wine.
Yeah, very pretty wine.
In fact, I'm since we're here at your place and I'm heading out tonight, it's Friday night. If you want to throw me a bottle, it'd be great.
I know somebody.
Just saying.
I know somebody who can hook you up. That's awesome. Where are you going?
Home.
That's awesome. Did I? Is the rumor true that you're actually going to be golfing in a little while with the family?
Maybe.
That's
maybe.
awesome.
A couple of my boys. Yeah. Next week, we'll see.
Can't be better than that. That's cool. Well, and are we all staying near home for the holidays for Thanksgiving? We
Laying
hanging
low.
out?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool.
Right on. Well, it's a beautiful time. Kind of best time of the valley. I love it right now with the colors and the rain.
We've got
by
our
the
fall
way.
colors.
And
We
the
had
rain.
8, 9, 10, 11 inches of rain.
Right?
10 days ago, which was great.
I mean, what are we coming up
Very
on?
happy.
We're coming in 3 days. We got or three storms, not three, but
storms
three
will
storms.
be-
We got almost as much as we had all last year.
Yeah.
We actually got more than we got last year, right?
It's fantastic.
It's unbelievable.
Which is great. So
Yeah.
we're excited about that. And as if anything can feel kind of normal, all of a sudden it feels kind of normal. We've got lots of good wines in the tanks, young wines. We've got some rain, got some cold weather. Holidays are coming. Sales are up.
Sales are up.
So fingers crossed that we can kind of keep moving on.
So for Thanksgiving, we've got a lot to be thankful for.
Absolutely.
Well, with that, I want to thank everybody who joined us, and thank you for your support of the Appellation Collection and the district generally. And we all want to wish you the best of holidays, the best of this Thanksgiving season. And gentlemen, great to be with you.
Thank you so much for
Thanks, guys.
a lot, Russ.
Russ, thanks for hosting
Yeah.
us. Good to see you guys. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.